In a packed courtroom, an arrogant judge ordered a war hero to remove his Medal of Honor, calling it a cheap decoration. The old soldier's quiet refusal triggered an immediate response from the highest levels of the nation's military. The air in Federal Courtroom 3B was stale with the scent of old paper and nervous sweat. On the witness stand sat Command Sergeant Major, Ret. Samuel, Sam, Thorne. At 72, his back was a little less straight than it had been a half-century ago, but his posture still held the ghost of military perfection. His dark, simple suit was immaculate, a stark contrast to the gravity of his purpose, but it wasn't the suit that drew the eye. Pinned to his lapel, just over his heart, was the Medal of Honor. Its simple blue ribbon and star-shaped pendant seemed to absorb all the light in the room, a silent, weighty testament to a day of impossible courage in a long-forgotten jungle. Sam wasn't here for himself. He was here for Leo. In the defendant's chair sat a young man in his early 20s, his face pale with fear. Leo was the son of Danny "Ghost" Callahan, Sam's best friend, the man who had died in his arms during the Tet Offensive. Sam had made a promise over his friend's still body, a promise to always look out for his boy. Now, with Leo falsely accused of assault by a local business magnate's son, that promise had been called due. Sam was here to be a character witness, to tell the jury about the quiet, steady honor he had watched Leo grow up with. Presiding over the courtroom was Judge Amanda Sterling. In her late 40s, she was the very picture of sharp, modern authority. Her black robes were perfectly starched, her gaze was like polished steel, and she ran her courtroom like a personal fiefdom. She had a reputation for impatience, especially with what she privately deemed military grandstanding, the perceived tendency of veterans to lean on their service in civilian life. Her sharp eyes landed on the medal. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet room. "Before we begin with your testimony, you will need to remove that display from your jacket." Sam's brow furrowed slightly. "Excuse me, Your Honor." "The medal, sir," she clarified, a clear edge of condescension in her tone. "This is a neutral place of law. We cannot have symbolic items that might unduly influence the jury's perception. Take it off." A collective, muffled gasp swept through the gallery. All eyes darted between the unyielding judge and the old soldier. Leo looked down at his hands, his shame and gratitude warring on his young face. His mother, Danny's widow, clutched a handkerchief to her lips, her eyes welling with tears. Sam's hand instinctively rose, not to unpin the medal, but to rest over it, a gesture that was both protective and defiant. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, respectful rumble, but it held a core of unbendable steel. "Your Honor, with all due respect," he began, "this medal isn't mine to remove. It belongs to the men who didn't come home from the valley we fought in. It is their testament, not my decoration." Judge Sterling's expression hardened. This was no longer about courtroom procedure, it was a direct challenge to her authority. "I understand your sentiment, Mr. Thorne, but my order stands. This court is the ultimate authority here, not your memories. Your refusal to comply could be interpreted as contempt." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a steely threat. "And I assure you, I do not make idle threats. There will be fines. There may even be detention. Are you prepared for those consequences?" The courtroom was thick with tension. The prosecutor shuffled his papers, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The jury members fidgeted in their seats, their faces a mixture of confusion and discomfort. They had come to hear a case about assault, and had instead stumbled into a battle of honor versus law. Sam looked past the judge, his gaze distant, as if seeing the faces of men long dead. He was thinking of Ghost, of the promise he'd made. Dishonoring the medal felt like a second death for them all. He lowered his hand from his chest and let it rest at his side. He looked directly at Judge Sterling, his eyes clear and resolved. "Then I will accept the consequences, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady and clear, reaching every corner of the silent room. "But I will not dishonor their memory. Judge Amanda Sterling stared at the old soldier, her face a mask of disbelief that hardened into pure fury. She, a federal judge, had been openly defied in her own courtroom. The quiet dignity of the man before her was not a plea for understanding, it was a declaration of a law higher than her own, and it was intolerable. His refusal was an indictment of her authority, and it had been delivered in front of a jury, reporters, and the public. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of her bench. "So be it," she hissed, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. She snatched up her gavel. "Command Sergeant Major Thorne, you have been given a direct and lawful order, and you have willfully refused it." Crack. The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot. "I hereby find you in contempt of this court." Crack. "Bailiff," she commanded, pointing a finger at Sam, who hadn't moved a muscle. "Remove this man from my courtroom. Take him into custody and process him for detention." The order hung in the air, stunning the room into absolute silence. It was one thing to dismiss a witness, it was another entirely to arrest a 72-year-old Medal of Honor recipient for wearing his medal. Leo shot to his feet, a cry of "no" on his lips, before his lawyer pulled him back down. His mother let out a strangled sob. The courtroom bailiff, a burly man in his 50s with a kind face, looked visibly pained. He exchanged a helpless glance with the prosecutor before beginning his slow, reluctant walk toward the witness stand. Sam watched him approach, his expression calm. He was an old soldier. He understood orders. He had given them, and he had followed them. He would not resist. He prepared himself, his shoulders squaring slightly, ready for the indignity to come, ready to be led away in shame for an act of honor. The bailiff reached the stand and extended a hand, his mouth opening to murmur a quiet apology. But before a word could be said, before his hand could touch Sam's arm, the great double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a powerful, authoritative thud that made everyone, including the judge, flinch. Two men in immaculate dark suits strode into the courtroom. They moved with a silent, coordinated purpose that spoke of years of federal service. Their faces were stoic, their eyes constantly scanning, missing nothing. They were U.S. Marshals, and their sudden appearance immediately seized control of the room's atmosphere, replacing the tense drama with a cold, official dread. They didn't proceed down the aisle, they simply flanked the entrance, masters of the space they now occupied. Behind them, a third man entered. He was in his 50s, with graying temples and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that did little to hide the immense authority in his bearing. He walked past the stunned gallery, his hard-soled shoes echoing on the marble floor, and didn't stop until he was standing directly before Judge Sterling's bench. He didn't wait to be acknowledged. "Judge Amanda Sterling," he said, his voice calm but resonating with absolute power. He held up a leather-bound credential. "My name is David Pierce. I am a Deputy Attorney General for the United States Department of Justice." He placed a thick, sealed envelope on the bench before her. "And this," he continued, his cold gaze unwavering, "is a federal injunction, issued by the Attorney General of the United States, prompted by an urgent, non-negotiable request from the Secretary of Defense." Judge Sterling stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't move to open it. "Your order," Pierce stated, his voice dropping but losing none of its force, "to arrest a recipient of the Medal of Honor for the act of wearing that medal in a court of law, has triggered an immediate federal judicial conduct review." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "That review is effective as of this moment. You will cease all action. And you will release Mr. Thorne. Now." The blood drained from Judge Sterling's face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly white. Her hand trembled as she reached for the envelope, the sharp crackle of the seal breaking echoing the sound of her career shattering. As she read the legal text within, her carefully constructed mask of authority crumbled, revealing the panicked woman beneath. The document was a legal sledgehammer, and she was on the receiving end. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had catastrophically inverted. The two U.S. Marshals moved from the door, walking slowly down the aisle until they stood a respectful distance from Sam, their presence no longer a threat, but a protective shield. The bailiff, who had been frozen in place, retreated back to his post, relief washing over his face. Deputy Attorney General Pierce was not finished. He turned his attention from the judge to the court recorder. "Let the record also show," he announced, his voice ringing with authority, "that due to the clear demonstration of potential judicial bias in this chamber, the case of the United States versus Leo Callahan will be immediately remanded. All records will be transferred to the Department of Justice for review and reassignment to a different judge." This was the final blow. It wasn't just about her anymore. Her arrogance had directly impacted the case she was presiding over. She had compromised her own judgment, and now the highest levels of government were cleaning up her mess. Leo stared, open-mouthed, as his mother wept silently, this time, with tears of overwhelming relief and gratitude. The jury looked on, a silent council that had just witnessed a trial within a trial. Judge Sterling looked out at her courtroom, now an arena of her own public humiliation. She raised her gavel, but all its power was gone. It was just a piece of wood. This court is adjourned," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She fled to her chambers as a wave of sound finally broke the silence, not loud or raucous, but a rising tide of respectful, heartfelt applause from the gallery, all directed at the old soldier who stood tall, the medal on his chest gleaming under the courtroom lights. Sam Thorne was escorted out, not by a bailiff to a holding cell, but by U.S. Marshals, through a crowd that parted for him like the sea. Within hours, the story was a firestorm. The image of the 72-year-old war hero, standing resolute against a federal judge, was irresistible. Cell phone footage from the gallery, though grainy, went viral. The hashtag Honor the Medal became the #1 trend nationwide. Veterans organizations released scathing statements. Politicians from both sides of the aisle scrambled to issue press releases condemning the judge's actions. Judge Amanda Sterling was officially suspended pending the outcome of the federal investigation, a process that everyone knew had only one possible conclusion. Her career was over, ended not by a lengthy legal battle, but by a single, disastrous decision born of hubris. A week later, as predicted, all charges against Leo Callahan were dropped following a swift review of the evidence, which was deemed flimsy at best. The cloud that had hung over his young life had vanished. But the final scene of this drama did not play out on a national news stage or in the halls of Congress. It took place in the quiet, hallowed grounds of Arlington National Cemetery. Under the shade of a great oak tree, Sam Thorne stood with Leo and his mother before a simple white headstone that read, "Daniel, Ghost, Callahan." Leo, his voice thick with emotion, looked at the old soldier. "Sam. I don't know how to thank you. You risked everything for me." Sam looked at the name carved into the stone, then placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "I didn't do it for me, son. I did it for him," he said, his voice soft. He gently touched the Medal of Honor still pinned to his suit. "This piece of metal, it's just a reminder. A reminder that we owe them, men like your father, a debt we can never truly repay. The only thing we can do is try to live with honor, and make sure their memory is never, ever disgraced." He stood there, a silent guardian keeping a promise made a lifetime ago, his greatest battle fought not in a faraway jungle, but in the quiet defiance of a courtroom. A promise is the purest form of honor. What is a promise or principle that you would stand for, no matter the cost? Share your story in the comments below. Please be respectful to all.